Bismillah Rahman Rahim. This is the second part of the MCQ paper which we have just uploaded, and this will have questions number 26 to question number 40. If you look at question 26, it says different substances such as sucrose and amino acids. So everybody knows these are called assimilates, and they are present in the phloem, can move in different directions in the phloem sieve tube elements. Not in the same one, but in different sieve tube elements. Some may be going up, some may be going down, because you see a white flower is a sink, roots are the sink, source is a leaf. So that leaf makes it, maybe it goes upwards towards a white flower, maybe in another sieve tube it goes downwards to the roots. So different substances such as sucrose and amino acids can move in different directions in the phloem sieve tube elements. Which statements explains this? So the answer is mass flow occurs in different directions in different phloem sieve tube elements at the same time. Some are taking it to the root, some are taking it to the upper part of the plant, maybe the white flower, maybe a red flower. So source and sink, the movement is between the source and the sink. So the movement is mass flow. It is the active transport is of course when the is loaded and unloaded. So loaded and unloaded, unloading is of course not active transport, but the loading part is all active transport because the hydrogen ions are pumped out, then the sucrose is co-transported back into the companion cell and then into the phloem tube. So question 26, then we go on to question number 27, which describes possible mechanism by which sucrose is transferred from a mesophyll cell into a companion cell. Co-transport with the active transport of hydrogen ions, co-transport by passive diffusion of hydrogen ions, and then facilitated diffusion through plasmodesmata. Now, but this was not between the companion cell and the sieve tube. It says which describes possible by which sucrose is transferred from a mesophyll cell. So this is the uh, sieve tubes. These are the sieve plates, and then there is a companion cell, and then of course there is a mesophyll cell. So it says it's not asking you that, it's asking you what described mechanism by which sucrose is transferred from a mesophyll cell into a companion cell. Now that is to only co-transport by passive diffusion of hydrogen ions. You see the hydrogen ions are pumped out by active transport. If hydrogen ions are pumped out by active transport and then the hydrogen ions diffuse back in. So the hydrogen ions then diffuse back in and they bring sucrose along with them. So this is how the mechanism by which this question was answered. Then we go on to question number 28. Now if you look at question number 28, I've given you a little diagram with it. Which statement about hemoglobin is correct? Carbon dioxide increases its affinity for oxygen. Its affinity for oxygen changes with altitude. It can combine reversibly with carbon dioxide. And all of that was BS. Beautiful story. And there's only one that hemoglobin can combine with carbon dioxide. So this diagram of course explained the previous question. So this is not on this question, this is on the previous question of the active transport or the co-transport. So it says sucrose in the diagram is actively transported into the phloem from leaf cells directly. ATP is used to pump hydrogen ions across the leaf cell into the phloem cells, creating a concentration gradient of ion. Step 2, co-transport protein uses the concentration gradient to move sucrose and hydrogen simultaneously, allowing protons down the concentration gradient. So that answers the earlier question. That answers that part of the question. Then we have question number 29. The diagram shows a section through the heart. It says labeled A, B, C, D. I've labeled that for you. And then of course it says which label is correct. So A is the pulmonary artery. No, I'm sorry. A is the aorta. Then B is the left ventricle. No, that's the left atrium. Then C is the right atrium. So that is correct. And D is the uh, aorta. That's wrong. It's a pulmonary artery. So I've labeled it for you and I've told you how it is wrong. Then we go on to question number 30. What is the reason for the increase in red blood cells in humans at high altitude? To compensate for the low percentage saturation of hemoglobin. Yeah, because partial pressure of oxygen is low, and that of course results in less diffusion, less saturation of less oxyhemoglobin formed. So that is why people who live at heights will have a larger number of red blood cells. Then we go on to question number 31. Which statement explains why the oxygen dissociation curve for hemoglobin is S-shaped? At high oxygen concentrations, oxygen dissociates from the hemoglobin molecule. Hemoglobin becomes saturated at low partial pressures of oxygen. Oxygenated hemoglobin accepts hydrogen ions from carbonic acid. Now, why the dissociation curve for hemoglobin is S-shaped is not because of that. The shape of the hemoglobin molecule changes when oxygen binds to it. So if you look at the graph, this graph which is like this is the part, and then it increases. So we're talking of this part, and I always tell you that this part is the important part, because you see, if there are maybe 1,000 hemoglobin molecules, the first binding is the difficult one, and then of course it changes shape, and then of course all of them bind very quickly to it. So this is the point that you have to understand. The shape of the hemoglobin molecule changes when oxygen binds to it. So you can see this is the gradient. Now I've used another color. You see it is gradually increasing, and then of course after this it changes and it sharply increases. So why is that happening? And this is what you have to understand, and this is something which you need to read up if you have not understood this part of the syllabus. Then the air pressure and altitude: less air pressure, less dense air, thin air holds less molecules per area, individuals gets gas pressure is less. Important consequences: lower number of oxygen molecules, lower number of water molecules, less and thinner air above the shield from harmful sun rays. So this is of course the altitude story which we have done in the syllabus. Then coming on to the next question, question 32. Which reactions take place in a capillary in an alveolus? Carbon dioxide plus water, carbonic acid, carbon dioxide, hemoglobin, carbaminohemoglobin. That's correct. Carboxyhemoglobin and carbaminohemoglobin. Please remember the difference between the two. Hemoglobinic acid, hemoglobin plus hydrogen ions, hydrogen carbonate ions plus hydrogen ions, carbon dioxide plus water. So which reaction takes place in a capillary in the alveolus? So that would be 3 and 4. Please remember there has been an earlier question which was slightly different, and it was slightly a different answer. So it's 3 and 4. Why? Because hemoglobinic acid will give up the hydrogen ions, and then the hydrogen ions will attract the bicarbonate ions. They will enter, and again the carbonic acid, and then dissociates into carbon dioxide and water. Then coming on to question 33. A student viewed 3 slides at both low magnification and high magnification. Always read the question very carefully. Each slide was a section through a different airway of the gas exchange system. The student observed 3 features in each slide. Number 1, irregular arrangement of cartilage highly folded in a layer, cilia on epithelial cells. Number 2, very few goblet cells, cilia on epithelial cell, thick layer of smooth muscle relative to wall thickness. Smooth muscles, tissue, blood vessels, many goblet cells. Now, which row is the correct set of identification for the 3 slides? Now, you see, irregular arrangement of cartilage. Now, you all have to remember is trachea has a C-shaped cartilage, very irregular. C-shaped cartilage, and this is the diagram that I've given you this slide to be able to figure this out. So irregular arrangement of cartilage has to be a bronchus. It can't be trachea. Trachea has got a very regular arrangement. So then the answer was only A and B. And then slide 2, very few goblet cells. And as compared to that, in 3 is many goblet cells. So then of course we come to these conclusions, and the answer to this was A, which is bronchus bronchiole, and the slide 3 was many goblet cells and blood vessels would be the trachea. So this was the answer to question number 33. Then we go on to question number 34. Which organelle is present in large quantities in ciliated epithelial cells? Ciliated epithelial cells are like vipers. They have to do a lot of work. And naturally, if they have to do a lot of work, you need a lot of energy. And if you need a lot of energy, what do you need? You need a lot of mitochondria. So, which ciliated epithelial cell means an energy is needed for the cilia to do the sweeping action. And that's a very, very powerful action. It's called the power stroke and then the recovery stroke. So, that is a very powerful method by which, all this mucus with all the dust and bacteria and pathogens and viruses is then swept upwards to the throat where it is swallowed and then it enters the stomach. Question 35. In some cases where a person has lung disease, the partial pressure of oxygen in the pulmonary veins is less than the partial pressure of oxygen in the alveoli. What could explain the difference in partial pressure of oxygen? Now the answer to that is 1 and 3 only. Why? Because you see it says lung disease is present, partial pressure of oxygen in the pulmonary vein. Pulmonary vein is the one which is bringing oxygenated blood to the left atrium. So why would the oxygen in the pulmonary veins be less than the partial pressure? So the reason for that is 1 and 3. A high proportion of alveoli collapsed and do not have enough alveolar capillaries. Why 3? The rate of diffusion of oxygen from the alveolar air to the surrounding alveolar capillaries is too slow. So this is why it was 1 and 3, because you have to understand that what was in the question. Did the person lung disease? And then, of course, the pulmonary vein and alveoli. So, pulmonary vein is the one which is bringing oxygenated blood to the left atrium. Next, we come on to question number 36. Why is it difficult to control the spread of malaria? Global air travel for commerce and tourism has increased. Well, that doesn't really matter if it is not from malaria-ridden countries, then it doesn't matter if it's from the North Pole to the South Pole. There is no malaria in the North Pole and the South Pole. It's too cold there. So global air travel for commerce and tourism, yes, aeroplanes and all that, of course, but maybe they carry mosquitoes and maybe they carry some flies from here and there, maybe they carry a few lizards as well and a few frogs as well, but that's a very rare thing. Number two, the mosquito vector rapidly evolves resistance to insecticide. Yes, so more mosquitoes, more spread of malaria. Then the Plasmodium pathogen shows great antigenic variability, so it's very difficult to control it. So if it is variable, then of course we're going to have it repeated infections of it. Then civil unrest and poverty results in overcrowded living conditions. Overcrowded living conditions will only work if there is an airborne droplet infection. Then of course people are coughing into each other's faces, and then of course that could result in the spread of a certain disease. But not overcrowded living conditions would result in the spread of malaria. Malaria needs an insect vector, and that insect vector is the female Anopheles mosquito. And the causative organism is Plasmodium, which is a protoctist, a protozoa. So, question 36, the answer was C, 2 and 3 only. Then we come to question 37. Now, if you look at question 37, which description gives the correct causes and transmission for TB, measles, and HIV? So that was very easy to figure it out. You know that TB is caused by bacteria. So the only two answers were A and B. The rest is all, as we say, BS. Beautiful story. And then measles is caused by a virus, and AIDS is caused by a virus. So it was very easy to figure it out. I've circled all the ones which were relevant, and you have to figure this out. Then coming on to question 38, which what describes a function of a T lymphocyte? So the answer was B. They can leave the blood and accumulate at the site of inflammation. So the answer is the others were all incorrect. They only found about secrete cytokines and respond to infections. They can leave the blood, secrete cytotoxins. That's another wrong Angrezi. And the secretary always present antigens. I'm sorry, antigens are present on the pathogens, and that is going to cause the infection. And then we come on to question 39. A person's blood group is determined by antigens present on the red blood cells. The table shows antigens, antibodies. During a blood transfusion, it's essential that the recipient blood does not contain antibodies to the donors. Which blood group can be given to a person with blood group AB? Now, it came in a previous paper, but that was a different question. So this time the question is, which blood group can be given to a person with blood group AB? AB is a universal recipient actually. So AB, and O. But then they told you in the question, a person is determined by antigens present on the red blood cells. And if a blood transfusion is to be given, the recipient's blood, so you see, so if you are the recipient who's getting the blood, you should not contain antibody to the donor's blood. You should not contain antibodies to the donor's blood. So if you are given, so you don't have any antibodies. This is the best part. People with AB blood group are universal recipients because they have no antibodies. So this was the clue in it, in which you have to figure this out, and this is how you read the question and you look at the clues which are given to you in the question. Okay, then we come to the last one, which is question 40. Which statement about immunity is correct? Why was it B, artificial active immunity lasts for a greater length of time than natural passive immunity? Now, of course, if you remember what is active, natural and natural and artificial. So active, natural active is infection, contact with pathogen, and you get the disease. You're sick for 10 days, and then you recover, and you have the plasma B cells and the memory B cells. Now, naturally passive is the one you get from the mother by the fetus, placenta, infant, milk, and all that. Then artificially is active is vaccine, dead or the weakened or attenuated pathogens. And the passage is the injection of immune serum, which is the gamma globulin, or something which is the antibody type of a stuff, which is injected like after we give you the tetanus shots. And if you've sort of had some sort of an accident and you've had it on the roadside because the soil contains the tetanus bacteria. So that completes this paper, and now I'll flip through the images which have been added for you all to revise. So now this was the first one. This was for question 2. So I want everybody looking at it, pausing it here, and then of course figuring it out and looking at all the sizes, mitochondria, bacteria, protein, atom, red blood cell, animal cell, plant cell, pollen, frog, and these are relative sizes on the logarithmic scale. 3 ribosomes. So you can pause it here and have a look at it and read through it. Then question 7 and question 8, the diagrams which are relevant to that. Then diagram relevant to question 9. And then of course this is the question 10, which you have to figure it out, is the carboxylic acid group, the stearic acid example of saturated fatty acid, and how linoleic acid an example of unsaturated fatty acid. Then question 14, glycolipid, glycoproteins, oligosaccharide chain, cholesterol inside, hydrophobic segment of the alpha helix. And of course, we have this one, which was related to question 18, cell growth, G1, S phase, G2. Question 24 and question 25. Question 27. 33. And of course, the last question is on the natural and passive immunity and the natural active, natural passive, artificial active, and artificial passive. And that completes this paper. I hope this has been a helpful exercise. And thank you very much, and all the very best.